So, uh, for the people who've already seen it before, I did, well, technically two previous videos regarding the um, origin of my schizophrenia and how it progressed throughout my life. I've done two videos of this before, and I want to upload a third, better, most up to date one. And yeah, so let me get right into it. So let's try and do this completely chronologically because it's a really long story. Um, so I'm pretty sure, I'm almost confident that it was either one of the first days had, like, fully aware consciousness that started around 3 years old or so. I either had this dream literally before I was actually on my body for the first time, or like a couple days after. A couple days after does make more sense, but the fantasy sounding one is so much more enticing, you know. So I had this dream where I just remember being very ready to do whatever I had to do in my life, is like the general overtone of it. And I had almost like a nightmare after that. But yeah, I had a weird dream, and this is where, like, almost a second personality that I had. It's not really a personality, it's just an extremely motivated mood, right? It's this part of myself that started like a personal psychology experiment on me as him unaware of himself, if you follow so far. So I developed this alternate mood that would basically just experiment on my mind using things like intention, like how people think of the law of attraction. I basically started a law of attraction experiment on myself. And fast forward a bit, I want to say I was around 12 or 13. I ended up picking being diagnosed with schizophrenia and developing actual schizophrenia because the kid thought it would be a cool way to do my life. So, interesting, right? So, let's go back to where we started though. So, around 3 years old, I was, listening to music. My mom had on, like In Sync and Backstreet Boys, the pop of like the mid 90s, right? And, uh, and I was listening to music. I remember being almost like euphoric as a child, right? In some of those moments, because it was just like, it was almost like my first little party, right? So the music was blaring, people were dancing, stuff like that, right? But I remember very distinctly the first time a song got stuck in my head was back then. And by stuck in my head, I mean literally playing the part that I guess I could remember or something. But it was usually song choruses. And yeah, I did that for, I don't know, probably at least a couple months. It was Backstreet Boys, their song Bye, right? Or however you say it. I don't remember the actual title. I don't care enough to look into these things because I still get this mind chatter. Um, so, yeah, I had at least that song stuck in my head probably until I started kindergarten. And it subsided a bit for that period of time. I started developing, basic socialization, right, as a child, as much as I could at the age I was. But like I said, I had that alter ego who was doing the, mind experiment on myself. And he would just pop up from time to time and like put something new in. And if I had to put like a number on it, it's probably been like, I don't know, like an 80% success rate on things, and the other 20% still kind of line up. It's just not the way you'd think it would, right? That kind of crap. So, yeah, fast forward a bit, I meet my older brother's friends for the first time, and they are they introduced me to hip hop music. I'm probably about 5 years old at the time. Well, it wasn't the first time I hung out with them, but it was after we had moved, and he was having friends over again. I remember it was back when you know so it wasn't five. I was probably like eight, and yeah, uh, yeah, it was because it was when World of Warcraft came out for the first time, and we were listening to hip hop music. I got introduced to like Warren G and like DMX and like all those early 2000s rappers. And I got the song "Get It on the Floor" by DMX stuck in my head. Just get it on the floor, get it on the floor, you know, and just that whole chorus, and it would just play on loop in my head. And so let me think real quick about this point before the next real breaking point. Is there anything else that I'm forgetting? Um, yeah, I remember I had this really, long day at like the dentist's office. And, being a kid, I was just like annoyed that I had to be there because it was like everyone in my family. We'd do like family dental visits, right? And we'd all go and we'd just wait there. So us kids would be sitting there for like an hour per person to get you know, our dental procedures done because I guess the guy was really meticulous or something. It felt like an hour at least. And I remember being in that altered mood state, that other ego, if you will, that was doing the science experiment and just really like digging into self-destructive ideation with it. And I still don't remember a whole lot about that day, but I remember that day very specifically. He was kind of just going at it. I would forget every time I would do this too. It's pretty crazy, and so yeah. So let's fast forward a bit. About 12 years old, and you can see that I work on this stuff on my channel too. Um, I think that I've solved existence. I have it solved, and I don't want to tell anybody because, I was a pretty critical kid. And the way he looked at it is that he didn't want to be, because it was, you guys don't think about it, but in the early 2000s, it was really popular. Like the idea of the child savant was really, really popular. And that's how conceited a kid can be, right? He was like, I don't want people to mistake me for a savant, so I'm not going to do anything with this. And again, the alter ego came in and did his number on the whole situation. And then I had another dream, kind of like the first one, where I was just affirming, like, my future existence, right? And woke back up with no recollection of it. And yeah, so then, you know, I probably had a bit more of the mind chatter because in that short situation that probably lasted a few days where I thought that I had the world figured out, um, he he had a bit of mind chatter too. This is when the dialogue started in my head, and it was with it was very simply with people around me, I would say something to them, they'd say something back, and then also respond in my head. And so that started around 12, and it only lasted a few days. And then I want to say I hit an off period for 13 and 14. And then 15 rolls around. I think I've figured it out again, and I'm hanging out with friends this time. And I am talking in like a really vague way. And like I remember specifically saying this like joke that basically more or less was like saying, "Hey, relativity guys, get it?" And then they, of course, because it's just kids being social and no one wants to look like an idiot, everyone laughed. It was like, "Yeah, man," and then like said something in my head, and I was just like, "I nailed it. I found it this time. I'm definitely in. I definitely have. It's definitely like a mind connected place." And it did actually develop in that stage. It got all the way to the point where we were, you know, working with a government together in my head. We were working with a government, and they were, giving us things to do. But this is where it gets interesting. Is I have another one of those dreams, except this is a nightmare of a dream. Actually, I I remember it very distinctly. We're in the garage, sitting with me, sitting in my garage, which actually happens later in my psychosis. I talk to this dream, but yeah, they're with me when I'm in my garage, sitting where I would smoke cigarettes, right? And I the government that we were talking to pulls all of us into the dream is what the dream is about, and it's an extremely lucid dream. It looked like straight up real life, like maybe with a little bit of like that dreamy haze on it, but it looked very distinctly like being in someone's visual field, and they drew us in there. And so in that dream, I got drawn in. Gave my friends the okay that I've got this guy's kind of like attitude. And then I flashed to driving down this big hill that was by my house with my heel just like hurting like hell, like really fucking bad. It felt like it was pulsing, like like a heartbeat, and it was just getting tighter and more painful as I was driving down that hill. And then I flashed to the front foyer of my parents' house in that town, and I'm going to walk up the stairs, right? I take control of the body and go to walk up the stairs, and my heel slams on the ground like it had an extra force of gravity to it, and froze me on, still to this day, one of the most terrifying pain stimulations I've ever felt in my life. I was freaking out for the few seconds that it lasted before it pulled me into more people's visual fields to talk to me about like how I guess I couldn't really tell you at this point what they talked to me about, but it was basically like probably something to the effect of how I messed up in some regard, trying to give me like, almost like a hell spiel. But, being a smarter kid than that, I moved on from that and found more stuff. So let's go. So that's when the schizophrenia was on and off. And then I have another low period from 16, 17. And then the mind chatter starts as dialogue at my friend's house. I'm sleeping on his couch, right? And my friend who's laying down in the room across from us, his voice comes on in my head. And he says, "Hey, man, here's a horse." And it was like three oppositionally facing triangles and like, flashing and like, like shifting a little bit. And he was like telling me, "Hey, man, this is a horse." And I uh, I was kind of you know I was kind of freaking out a bit at that point because I knew that I had mind chatter and I was old enough to know what schizophrenia was at that point. And I was like, oh God. And then, it's like being in college at that point. I was like, well, there's no other choice but to just hide it in that, mid 2010s mental health culture that I was so, averted to. Um, I decided to hide it. So I um, I tried to fall asleep. I think I did fall asleep, and then I woke up and it was still going. So this is when I started to live with my schizophrenia. I was about 18 years old, and it made me very quiet. It made me very, I think the word is pensive. It made me very careful, right? It made me very cautious to the point that I was almost catatonic because I did think that everyone around me was talking to me in my head with the way that it started. So I thought that everyone was living a double life where mind was like another place where people communicated, right? So I started to fall into that delusion pretty quickly because of how well it lined up together. But it's like being older now, I understand the vagueness of symbolic structure like language and imagery, um, and even how specific body language can look. It's it's still not like its body language isn't even definitive as much as it could be, you know. But yeah, it's like, so I'm going through this. It's just, you know, really like, it's like simple stuff at first, almost like the music, but then later down the line, it progresses into like angry people, right? And it's so that's probably about like 19 years old is when I'm basically just with a madhouse in my head where people are just, you know, at each other's throats pretty much. And I was trying to mediate. I was, exhausted by it. I even fought a couple times. I don't think I finally reached a tipping point with that until I was almost at the end of this phase, and it was when I was working at McDonald's. I um, I started to get pretty angry at one of my friends in my head because I didn't like how he was treating his girlfriend or something. I don't really remember, but that kind of whole mentalization that makes people think of the dangers of schizophrenic people, right? It's like he could have just blown up at someone. And I honestly could have. I'm not even going to lie. I could have. I could have just gotten mad at someone else, but I was pretty good at controlling that and back then. Um, so yeah, I'm uh, I'm working at that McDonald's. I think I'm like 20 at this point. Um, and I'm working. Starting to get more social with my coworkers and stuff. And the mind chatter turns. See, I knew I would miss a point. When I was in second grade, I saw an alien in my room. It was like glowing green, and that was the first real visual hallucination I had. It looked literally like life. The light was even projecting properly across the walls and shit. So, yeah, I saw this alien when I was like, second grade. So what was that for me? 7. So I was, you know, I freaked out. I screamed for my dad. My dad comes running in and flips on the light. And when the light goes on, the alien disappears, right? So then 20 years old at McDonald's, right? I am dealing with my schizophrenia now at the point where I'm even getting mad at it. And I, um, I start getting this, this feed, this mind chatter feed from aliens that are actually trying to talk to me and like do stuff with me. They're like showing me like images of like expanding like civilizations in my head, like multiplying like cells and explaining that they can't get to us as quickly as they want to because of how rapidly the place is expanding, right? And me being completely enthralled by the continuity from earlier in my life and the fact that it's on the topic of aliens again with absolutely no like force put into like reaching this talk chatter with aliens, I began corresponding with the US government about it because I couldn't find any other institutions to correspond with it about it with. And so the government would take it, and that's why I gave it to the government. And I am glad that I did still because it could potentially help us move the civilization forward eventually, honestly, because they seemed very diplomatic. And who knows if it was real, is how the world pretty much works in science at this point after the most recent Nobel Prize in Physics and all that. It's like, who knows, is pretty much back where we're at. So, anyways, um, yeah, um, so I'm getting the mind chatter from the aliens, and I am doing this for about a month. I had some pretty crazy stuff happen. Like there's some construction on the college campus that I was at. Very early stages of construction. They didn't even have the walls up. It was just like supports and like, structural pieces that were in like a ditch on the campus. I go into the library, walk up a flight of stairs, walk down one less flight of stairs, go out of the library, and there is a whole new cafe on the campus that day within the time that I was in the library, and there are people in it already and everything, and that was pretty weird. And then there's a couple more situations that are a little less significant. Like I had like a literal crop circle in my ashtray of cigarette butts. It was like shaped like a ninja star, a shuriken, right? And yeah, it was weird. So I'm doing this for about a month. I'm just talking to aliens in my head and corresponding with the government. And then I get a call, and it, because I was talking about corresponding on my Facebook and stuff to the point that I had a friend call me and tell me not to come around again, right? Um, I acknowledge that this call could have been from like a friend trying to screw with me or something. But I got this call that was that basically went like this. It was a private number because I could do that. I think you can still do that, but it's like it was on a landline. It said a private number on the read on the screen and everything, and I pick it up, and it's just this kind of gravelly voice going, "We have soldiers disappearing overseas, and we need you to figure out why." And it went on to explain that their names are literally disappearing off of rosters. And so you know, I was, happy to help, but I was a little scared at that point. And then I go out into into the garage that I was hanging out in to do these talks with my mind chatter, and it it escalates pretty quickly, and um, everyone in my mind chatter was like, captured essentially, if not worse, by another alien civilization, and then I descended into a really strong psychosis that I can only really compare to the game Silent Hill. Maybe not as physically involved, but very much a hallucinatory Silent Hill, right? So in there I continue corresponding. I figure out quite a few things, and that lasts about a year. it was a very life-changing experience for me that pretty much no one in my life truly understands, right? That I went through, but being scared to death like that for a year straight, it's like I can empathize with people who live in like really bad areas or like even potentially in a war zone. I can definitely empathize with them after that because it scared the hell out of me. So I do that for about a year, and then for the next year and a half of my psychosis, I'm literally just waking up every day and just talking and talking until I go to bed, driving around talking, sitting at parks in my car talking, even if I can find a quiet place at a park, I'm out there talking to my mind chatter. And I was, on a dysfunctional logic once again in my life, and I was thinking that I could find a way out, like basically just like pull in an alien portal to another, alien planet. And I worked on that for almost 2 years, like I said, a year and a half. And I was trying to do that with every ounce of effort that I could muster, and it was quite a bit. And I literally have like notebooks with pages full of gibberish of me just trying to like crack the code like it's a matrix or something. And yeah, I do that for like 2 years. And then I finally got angry enough with the world that I was living in because it's like, as far as I knew, the people I was living with were like old time killers and like mythological um, antagonists. And that's who I was living with. And I finally snapped one day and got pretty angry. And yeah, I got a psychiatric arrest after that. And I I kind of couldn't let go of the world that I was looking for, and to the point that in the ward, I was still like telling my parents, and they would come see me. I was like, we're gonna get saved soon. I know it was basically all I would really tell them until the last few days where I played cards with my dad a couple times and kind of really got myself thinking that, maybe I'm wrong and maybe it isn't this simple. And thankfully I did that because there's plenty of science to catch up on, and I'm still doing it. What is it? 4 years later. Um, so, um, now, basically, well, yeah, that part really isn't important. That's just side effects from the antipsychotic I was on. That part sucked. Lasted about 6 months. Um, but now that I have full control of myself, and I'm still schizophrenic, and it's considered disabled. So I, I, basically what I have now is like a mind chatter that I can just talk to, like about anything, almost like an AI, right? And yeah, I do it pretty frequently. I use it to continue on, honestly, what seems like you can't really get it, but after how much I've thought that I knew the root of existence, it is a project of mine now. And I'm tackling it from the perspective that all the scientists and doctors are afraid to take, which is with myself as the first-hand evidence, because that's technically not scientific, because we're unreliable or whatever. I think it's a lot scarier to think about what if we are reliable and this place is just extremely complicated, you know? So, yeah, it's like, so, I, Yeah, I still work on stuff because of my schizophrenia to this day, but I am no longer delusional and, out of touch with reality completely. I'm not psychotic. I still hallucinate regularly, and that's why I still get the schizophrenia diagnosis. Um, and yeah, I kind of live it day to day, and I'm pretty happy. I have something really cool going on. Something so cool that I'm not even concerned that I'm going to be pretty well known eventually once I get my foot in the door somewhere. But yeah, it's like um, I learned a lot, and I had a weird life. And since I have all this stuff up, I can say that I feel like I've accomplished what I wanted to since I do have all this stuff up on my YouTube. So that's my new schizophrenia story. It's much more put together than the previous ones, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Uh, you know, give me a subscribe or something to help get me into the scientific sphere a little bit faster. I would appreciate it. I have a lot going on that I want to share that might, really expand our understanding of neurology or maybe even psychology or something like that because I'm willing to be an experiment. So, like it, subscribe, share, all that, just send it around. Show people that you found a cool video on the corner of YouTube because that's what I do this for is to be on the corner right now. So I will cut it off here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Take care, everyone.